Well, Senator Marsha Blackburn just joined us to talk about maintaining election integrity. Let's bring our panel back in to talk a little bit more about this. She talked about election integrity, Ruth. She also had some comments about what's going on in Cuba. Anything that you would like to comment on about what she had to say?
Well, I thought that that the senator was very spot on with her comments about Cuba and about the Cuban nationals. We have to do everything that we can to support the people of Cuba in having democracy and freedom. What we know is that socialism does not work, and it hasn't been working for Cuba. And so that's why we should be standing up and speaking out and helping in any way that we can the people of Cuba to maintain or actually to gain their freedom. And again, freedom isn't free. So I hope that the American people and those who are supporting in America this, these upcoming socialist types of theories and practices will understand that if we're not careful, we ourselves might find ourselves fighting even harder, like the Cubans are, for their liberties and their freedoms. So we have our freedoms, and we need to protect them and keep them. And then we need to support the people of Cuba in having their liberties and their freedoms.
Well, Hal, talking about these liberties and freedoms, obviously the people of Cuba dealing with 6 decades, 62 years to be exact, of oppression, stripped of their liberties in many ways. And yet here at home, we find ourselves at our own type of crossroads, trying to deal with the fact that conservative voices are being drummed out of the public square, having to deal with the fact that basic concerns about election integrity, those conversations have been painted as somehow some type of betrayal of America's core values. How do we get back to Americans being able to engage honestly about their concerns and know that those concerns will be taken seriously?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly the social media companies have done everything they can to remove conservative voices, and they continue to do so today. I wouldn't certainly put it in the same category as what's happening in Cuba, but Cuba's Cuba's where it ends, right? What we're experiencing now in the United States is the beginning of it, and when you see with a lot of the socialists now in the United States, representatives openly saying they're socialists, as Marsha Blackburn said. That's the beginning. That's how it starts. And so Cuba's where it ends, and we don't want to be there. So what we need to do in the United States, look, we have, these voting laws that are going on, we just talked about, that are changing. Those are being done perfectly legally by the state legislatures. The courts have upheld the changes. In fact, most of these changes, like in Texas, my home state, they're much more liberal than many of the blue Democrat states are for voting purposes. They have longer voting hours, more early voting, more absentee voting, all of those things. All that they're trying to do, for instance, in Texas, is rein in some of the craziness that went on during COVID, where you had cities like Houston just decide they're going to do whatever they want. You can't have individual cities, Houston, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, decide we're going to do whatever we want from a voting perspective and potentially corrupt the vote of the entire state, which then corrupts the vote of the entire country. So the legislature's doing what they're doing is perfectly legal and perfectly fine. And when you have this show that's happened in Texas where they run out of the state, that's not the way it's supposed to operate. I mean, they're moving outside the bounds of the way things are supposed to operate, and they're going to run up to D.C. and put on press conferences with the Biden administration and say that, that it's voting suppression when it's really voting integrity. Yeah, but look, I'll just finish real quickly. I think America is going to come back in 2022 because people are seeing what's happening here and they're not liking it. And so you're going to see a movement back towards conservatism over the next 2 years.
Yeah. Difficult to get the message out, though, Julio. And I was just looking at the images that we're seeing from the streets of Cuba today and yesterday, specifically that image just went by with a little boy holding up the American flag there in the streets of Cuba. Your thoughts on what Senator Blackburn had to say?
Well, she was certainly spot on just about everything. But just to make a point of what Hal was saying, what we've been saying here, that this is just the beginning of where it ends eventually in Cuba. Listen, the social media suppression that we have in this country, when it's such a powerful medium and it means so much to disseminating the political message in advance of perhaps the most consequential midterm election that this country has ever seen that we're going to get next year, there's something has to be done in order for conservative voices to ensure that we can get our message out. This problem with the CDA 230, the Communications Decency Act, and big tech suppression of the conservative message is going to play a big role. Yes, America is fed up, and America is failing in a monumental way right now under Democratic leadership. But if we're not able to get the message out there because of this sort of suppression, which is tantamount to what you're seeing in Cuba, where they're cutting off the internet so these Cubans cannot basically organize and demonstrate peacefully. If we don't get a rein on that, it's still going to be very difficult to win next year, even with the horrific performance from the Democrats.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to have our panel continue to stand by. We'll have more from you in a little bit.